We have some time, some 20 minutes now for Q&A and also for some discussion. And I'd like to have the speakers, some of the speakers here at the front. Nathalie, please. And Ad van der Kroft, please. Stephen Dont, sorry. And Andrea is still here. And I also like to introduce to you Rutger Zuidam. Where is he? Rutger? Already here? No? No. Well, then we go on with you four. Are there any questions for these speakers? Who'd like to have a question? Please. Can you short state your name and have a brief question? And we ask the members of the panel also to have brief answers.
Hello, my name is Yvonne Jordens. I'm head of career services at this university. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the employability of students related to the blockchain in education.
Ooh, understood.
So I'll try to jump in there. The BlockCert standard, when it produces the digital artifact, the credential or the record, includes fully machine-readable metadata that can be used to pre-screen applicants for positions of employment or programs of study on the basis of things like minimum eligibility criteria, demographic data. In the case of Europe, the European Qualifications Framework, which is going into all of the Maltese certificates that are being issued. So it's really affording a new way of not only verifying the authenticity of credentials, but documenting and mapping skills. So with the types of analytics that you're able to see on the number of times that your credentials are being shared and verified as an issuing institution, if you're large enough, if your data set is large enough, you can also begin to map that onto things like employment data, migration data. So you can begin to use the platform as a policy-making tool. For example, to see if there's a brain drain in a certain area in a certain field, or if there's a skills gap that needs to be filled.
Thank you. Any other of the speakers who want to comment on this issue?
Just very briefly, I think the issue with employability is, I think, one of adoption. So employers need to be aware of the benefits to them of having this form of verifiability, and that needs a sufficient number of students to have it, but for a sufficient number of students to opt into it, they need to see a benefit for employers. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation with getting started, but the value comes from the network effect of having a lot of this being available.
Thank you. Before we go on with the...
Yes, very briefly. In one of the reports I showed earlier, the OpenCred one, that we described validation of non-formal learning, we triangulated our research to looking at students who are taking MOOCs for professional development, the universities offering MOOCs for professional development and open badges, and employers, because we wanted to see this triangulation, how it works in practice. But we are not discussing blockchain then, we are just talking about open badges offered in the open world, right? And what we realized is that it was difficult to find employers actually looking at open badges for hiring people. Most because of what was mentioned, awareness raising is a big topic, and also because of the issue of trust. Right? But now, since you are implementing blockchain to facilitate that, we are hoping that the issue of trust is overcome. So there is potential, but not as much evidence yet, as far as we know.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to the next question, I'd like to introduce Rutger Zuidam. Perhaps you can say a few words who you are. And Rutger will do the last contribution of this morning, but I thought it's very nice to have you here at the panel too, to be able to go into the question and answers. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. Great that you're all here. I'm Rutger van Zuidam, founder of Dutch Chain and organizer of the Dutch Blockchain Hackathon, which is the largest blockchain hackathon in the world.
That's enough, Rutger.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Thank you. question from the audience. Who? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Teunis Doctor. I'm the student assessor of the Center of Information Technology. Thank you for all your great insights on the technology blockchain. My question is, what is really needed is a great network, and LinkedIn has a very great network in which people also enter their credentials without actually any trust, because you have to trust them. Is there any way we can use this technology in combination with LinkedIn and higher education industry and government to create this system?
Yes.
That's enough.
So if you paste in a link to your Blockcert in your LinkedIn profile, it'll unfurl. So you can view the credentials that way, and then of course clicking on it will take you to the friendly web view where you can verify its authenticity.
Yes. You can. Existing verifications on LinkedIn or endorsements on LinkedIn, of course, can't, because you don't have anything backing them up to say where they came from or why they were assigned. But yes, in principle, in future, yes.
A small addition, maybe I would suggest partnering up with Microsoft on this, as they are the owner of LinkedIn and they're very much into blockchain developments. They're working with Ethereum, and I think this would be a shortest path to integrating the whole stuff when you get the verified sign behind your right there.
Thank you. But I'd like to ask.
For discussion?
Yeah, of course. I would like to ask you a question, but
Yes, yeah,
please.
but I was just going to, because you're working with these possible links and put them onto a LinkedIn page like that. But the problem is then the user has to be engaged to do that. Mm-hmm. So the user is put in a situation where you're counting on his effort to do something, and LinkedIn is earning money from the fact that you're putting your information and those kinds of things and sharing that with Microsoft. Are there ways, because you've shown also the way to tokenize these kind of things, and maybe also from Learning Machine, are there ways to reward users to do these kind of things? Are you aware of these kinds of efforts at this moment?
I hadn't actually considered it, but there certainly could be. It wouldn't be terribly difficult to directly financially reward people, in fact, for putting things on in these sorts of verifiable format, or perhaps to get some payback, I guess, when these credentials are used or checked by someone. I guess so, yes.
Yeah, so when you're talking about social media participation and token buy-in, you're talking about two different mechanisms of incentivization. So the incentives people have to post their credentials on LinkedIn are that, of course, it increases the chances that they'll get noticed and find the job that they want. From a token standpoint, you're using tokens to trade for some type of usability on the token-based system. So they're just different ways of approaching incentives.
Okay. They're in the back of the room. I don't know where the mic is. Can you throw it, please?
Yeah, where?
Yeah, it's throwable. Yeah, that's okay.
That's catchable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Luc Buit. I'm with the province of Groningen. Thank you all for very interesting presentations. I have two questions. One, are you aware of any institutions that strive to certify the previous education, so past degrees, etc., on the blockchain? And second, could you give any indication as to the savings and the administrative cuts that you can make in education by applying these technologies?
Thank you. On the first question, who will take the floor? Yes? Okay. You've answers for any question, so...
No, I'm not aware of anyone going back to verify existing qualifications on the blockchain. There's nothing in principle difficult about it. You would have to go through the current manual paper-based verification system to do that. So
And nobody is interested actually in my swimming diploma of 1975.
Could be useful. It might help. Yes. What was the second question again? Sorry,
The second question was again.
The second question is the
Benefits,
cost cuts in applying this.
We haven't quantified those yet. One of our partners has quantified some of the benefits in terms of recruitment, as I said, in terms of reducing lead time to getting people into post, but in terms of cost benefits for the institutions, we haven't quantified that. I don't know if anyone else has.
Yes, please.
So to your first question and second question, yes, actually, one of our early pilots is with an international university consortium that they own multiple campuses around the world, each of which has different legacy credentialing systems. Some use student information systems that are as simple as Excel spreadsheets. Others have, highly complex custom-built systems. So one of the promises that they've seen in the Learning Machine Federated System is that they can consolidate their issuing operations across multiple campuses from a single governance layer.
Thank you.
Maybe the cost savings part is just part of the story. I would say focus on new opportunities that arise when you use technology in a large network, in a large ecosystem, and focusing on the cost is just a small part of the story. All the new things you can build with it will be worth much more than the costs you can save.
I'd like to ask a question to Stephen, but actually to get a little discussion between you, and that's about the first part of the morning was about the promises, and the second part was going into the thing and see what happens. And I'm very curious about the pace of developments and how promising the promise is. So could you elaborate on that point, and then perhaps that the others who think differently that can add to this discussion?
Yeah, well, the development phase and speed is quite high. A lot of things that we've just been shown, I think, with Alan, is things that I think from the last months, the credentials and credits that are given, those things really are just in the mind of developers, and so a lot of these uses and a lot of these possibilities are not really thought through. So a lot of things that we still can do with that, and which show that the pace of development is quite fast. The problem, for example, for Learning Machine and for other partners is that you're there at a certain moment with the technology that's available. So you're putting block certs onto Bitcoin, and so I'm not sure if Bitcoin is the future for block certs. So maybe at the time when you had problems with Ethereum, that then the wise choice was to go for Bitcoin. But so you see that in this development phase, you're faced with a lot of technical issues which are not easily solved. So we're still there in the woods and trying to find out which direction we should really go to. I'm not sure. Maybe you can comment a bit on these things that I've just said. But, so the pace is very fast. We have to make technological choices, and we do not really understand the usability and the uses of what is really going on it. So I hope that you might give some clarity on that.
Yes, please.
Can I just follow up on that? I think it's very important to crack on the technology and have it ready for use. But the big challenge is to build an ecosystem around blockchain and the issuing of credits on the blockchain. We definitely need to involve stakeholders at all levels, to push it from the technological possibility to actually a reality. And we have to work in collaboration with stakeholders, policymakers, institutional managers, in the mapping qualifications against European frameworks, ECTS, really to make it happen. So it's much more than having technology ready, but it's really a matter of building an ecosystem around it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other comments?
So I've actually forgotten what I was going to say now, so I shouldn't have come forward. No, I think you're right. So the technology is at a certain state right now. Development is very fast, and the platforms are not necessarily very sophisticated. Now, one of my colleagues was complaining that writing with Ethereum is like doing 1960s programming. You can't take two strings and stick them together easily while you're writing. You have to write subroutines yourself to do that. I mean, come on, it's painful. That's at a technical level. But yeah, these things are changing very rapidly. I would say, yes, there are going to be new platforms coming which are more capable and allow you to do more different things. And it will be important. If something is certified and verified on, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, you can, with a new system, you can piggyback on that verification to get things into the new format. One of the things that I think this is why it's important to use semantic standards for representing the information is that you're not stuck to a fixed, I don't know, binary format that someone has come up with to fit things on a thing. You have a standard readable set of data that itself tells you what it means, so that in the future, if you need to transfer things, you can do that without losing information. I think that's one of the strengths of using these kinds of technology for that. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
Maybe a small addition. If you have the technology pace as well as the consortium pace, I think it's very important to separate the two. So if you look at what you can do today with the technology, it's often much more than especially the incumbents think. So there you can use the speed of and the innovation power of startups who begin with a clean slate. And I think it's very important that the stakeholders in the current situation inform these startups and collaborate with them so they can learn about the context and the issues that there are there. And also, along the way, you have a lot of content with your stakeholders to agree upon when it's already there. So I think if you have the talk first and after the talk you're going to do, that's exactly, it should be the other way around. So you can learn from building actual applications that focus on the end user. So if you look, for instance, from the successful project from the World Food Programme, they tried it first for 100 users and then for 10,000 users. And now they can scale up for 100,000 refugees, and they're moving incredibly fast. And they, I mean, the UN has quite some legacy as well, and they show that they can perfectly do it while working with these startups. So I think this experimentation level and consortium building, stakeholder management should be on a separate base and interacting with each other.
Okay, thank you very much. Last comment on the...
Last comment. So one of the questions that we receive most frequently when we speak around the world is, how do you know that the Bitcoin blockchain is still going to be around in 50 years? And so that's, you know, to your point. Our answer to that has to do with likening the Bitcoin blockchain to more or less where the internet was in the mid-1990s. It's kind of this new networked infrastructure that the vast majority of people don't understand, but there's a sense that it holds great promise in ways that can't actually be mapped out in advance or articulated in advance. Now, it's also important to keep in mind that different blockchains are very different. They're optimized for different purposes. The reason that the Bitcoin blockchain is a very safe bet from our perspective is that it was architected to be the most secure way of transferring digital assets that humanity has ever developed. It is the most secure network for storing data that currently exists on the planet. And we've seen its adoption increase exponentially. It is far and away the most frequently used blockchain. Its cryptocurrency denomination, Bitcoin, is being adopted at a furious rate as a store of value. I think it began this year at around 800. It's now well over 5,000. and is projected to only rise in value. And that increase bodes well for the future of the network infrastructure. Not all blockchains will last. Not all tokens will last. But if you imagine the landscape as a power law curve, where kind of the top 20% have the vast majority of users, and then there's a long tail, the Bitcoin blockchain is at the very top of the power law curve. So we actually consider it a very safe bet for the future.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for all the speakers.